Oh hey Isekai! Almost didn't see you there. It's not like you've been a constant presence in almost every season of anime for nearly a decade now. But I will admit this time around, have you got a new haircut? You look good. Let's talk about that. We've done Isekai roundups before on this channel for previous seasons, but honestly I feel like before when we did this, it was more like an autopsy of the genre. It felt like we were in the latter half of what might one day be called the golden age of isekai adaptations, and we were just getting what remained at the bottom of the barrel, with only like the rare gem that popped up on occasion. After all, we've seen this before with other popular genres, like when the slice of life genre boomed in the 2000s, for example. Not only that, but isekai has been mainstream for nearly a decade, depending on when you say that its real popularity started. So that has to mean we are close to moving on from it, right? Until a new genre comes along to sweep isekai away, we are still going to be getting titles that belong to it. And with this season specifically, I feel like we've gotten quite a number of shows that don't fit the traditional mold of the genre. Shows that, by all accounts, are isekai, but also have some interesting traits that make them stand out. It's honestly odd that this many came out in one season, but I will accept this gracious gift regardless. So today on Glass Reflection, we are looking at 4 isekai anime from the fall 2021 season and why you should already be watching them. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by the good people over at Crunchyroll. Visit their website and subscribe to their service to watch several of these shows as they air, to be caught up with the various discussions about them as they continue. The world's finest assassin gets reincarnated in another world as an aristocrat. Let's start with the title that has the longest name to get that out of the way. Can you guess that this was a light novel originally? As per usual with long titles, the basis of the show is self-explanatory, though thankfully it doesn't tell the whole story like others might, and I appreciate that a lot. Here, the finest assassin from our world is killed and reincarnated into a family of noble assassins in a fantasy setting. Why? Because the goddess in charge of such things grants him the mission to kill this world's hero, specifically after the hero has already saved the world from the Demon King. So the hero needs to be killed because apparently the world is going to be destroyed anyway if the hero lives. But it's not initially stated why, so assuredly this will become an important plot point later on, assuming the adaptation goes that far. The original source material is still ongoing as of writing, and most of the anime is just build-up so far. Like a well-developed prologue of what's to come. Our protagonist gets trained by his assassin family, comes into contact with a number of girls who exhibit abilities that will help him in his quest, and largely, as I said, we are just building and training. What makes the show interesting as an isekai for me is actually twofold. Firstly, is oddly enough a number of throwaway scenes that don't actually add much to the main story, but instead help with the world building, and it gives us further questions moving forward. Throughout this series, we flash back to the goddess, who keeps attempting to reincarnate the finest people from a variety of skill sets to do the exact same mission as our protagonist, kill the hero. Probably as a failsafe, since we are talking about the end of the world and you can't guarantee this one guy's gonna get the job done. Fair enough. But hilariously, they immediately flash forward to show us where these other reincarnated individuals end up. And they are all massive failures for one reason or another, and these moments become increasingly odd, yet enjoyable each time. They don't need to do this. The writer didn't need to pen this, they didn't need to adapt this, but I am glad that they did. Again, it doesn't help with the main story at all, but I like them being able to flesh out the world while also taking things about the setting super seriously. Second, and a bit more seriously this time, we don't usually get this kind of layered buildup in an isekai plot that exists here. In fairness, because the vast majority of isekai nowadays is far more lax in their narrative structure, so you don't really need it. Each new episode of Finest Assassin feels like it's adding to what came before, layering on plot as we go along in a way that is neither overwhelming us with plot exposition, nor leaving us wanting more for lack of explanations. We can see the protagonist slowly gain new powers and abilities and allies to help in his mission. The question will end up becoming, however, if the narrative can come to a satisfying conclusion by the end of the cour. At the time of writing, the show is still airing, and again, the original light novel is ongoing, so chances of this series tying everything together in a bow by the end is extremely unlikely. But what all of this builds up to, how the final assassination is carried out, or if it will be carried out, determines how the show will fare. But even if it ends off in a way that you'll need to go and read the light novel to finish the story, I can't necessarily say that it's a bad thing when this story has been this interesting. Restaurant to Another World, Season 2. I wonder if this is cheating somewhat. Not only because as a sequel, it's hard to say what this isekai offers is something new and exciting that we've never seen before, because we have, but also because technically this is a reverse isekai. Fantasy characters instead come to our world instead of the other way around, but that's precisely why I love it so much. Right, so in the first season, which continues here, we have the restaurant Western Cuisine Nikoya, which normally operates as a standard sit-down restaurant in Japan somewhere except for 1 day a week. On Saturday, the front door connects itself to a myriad of locations in an alternate fantasy world, and denizens of that world come in for a bite to eat. Now, the reason why I bring this series up as something that is doing something different, despite, first getting an adaptation 4 years ago, is that really, in the last 4 years, no other series to my knowledge has really done anything similar to this. We've had isekai with slice of life aspects, for sure, even occasionally shows that involve cooking and food, but none with this kind of episodic structure, or at least none that do it anywhere near as well as this one does. Also, the fact that this show is good enough to get a sequel after 4 years should tell you something about its quality, if nothing else. The appeal of this series is not in any kind of long-running narrative, though several exist through loose conversations with the main cast, but instead the show tells a new story with every episode about people from this fantasy world who find themselves in front of a magical door to another world. Also the food. I shouldn't have to mention that the food looks good in an anime about food. Even simple things like cabbage, because no anime is allowed to animate cabbage badly anymore. Ever since that one time. There are some repeated aspects with every story, the awe of the characters when they question their new surroundings, or the happy greetings from our waitress as she seats and greets the new customers and politely asks them if they can read the common language of the Eastern continent that the menu is written in. There is a comfort in the repetition you get used to, which fits the show extremely well, as it's like a favorite meal that you order each week as you get a new episode. The second season boasts new character designs, but still that same feeling of comfort as we are introduced to new characters and old favorites who find their way through the magic door. Thankfully, both seasons are available for streaming at the time of writing, and I highly recommend both, not because it's necessary for any plot-related reason to watch season 1, but just because the individual narratives are so engaging that you wouldn't want to miss it. You can technically watch season 2 without the first and probably pick up most things through context, which would be an interesting way to watch this series, come to think of it, as you would just be experiencing it like all of the new patrons that this season introduces. But for the times that we do flash back to previous characters and their stories, it would probably be helpful to know what's going on as you watch. So yeah, I know I just recommended to you to watch like a whole bonus season worth of episodes, but it's not like I haven't been saying watch more anime at the end of my videos for a while now. It's worth it. You're welcome. Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation. I'll be brief with this as we are just continuing on from earlier in the year, but Mushoku Tensei is getting better than what I would have originally given it credit for. I did talk about the start of the series back when it aired earlier in the year, so if you want to go and get the gists of my thoughts and criticisms on that, I suggest you go and take a gander at it so I don't have to repeat myself. But the second core of the season is still no slouch in the animation department as expected. The continual additions to the world building have been stellar, and really I feel like it would not be wrong for me to say that the best parts of this show have been continually elevated, and most of my misgivings about the show have been muted compared to the initial core. I realize that listing Mushoku Tensei in a list of shows that are providing quote-unquote something new with the genre is a bit hilarious considering how influential the original material has been, to the point where many other isekai owe large parts of their stories to Mushoku Tensei, so it's not really original in that sense. But that's the thing about being influenced by a piece of work. It doesn't negate the positive aspects of the original, nor does it mean that what follows will absolutely be better than what came before. In that light, while other shows have tried to reinvent a lot of what this narrative has and offers, perhaps even being successful in some ways, I don't feel like most of them have the same all-around package, hence why I'm still recommending this. The continuing story of Rudy and his crew as they adventure across a new continent and find new aspects to the world that we haven't really seen before is continually fascinating. Say nothing about the interpersonal relationships between the characters that's been some of the best that I have seen in the genre. Other shows that are influenced by this one are good at maybe one or two of its aspects, while Mushoku Tensei has proven that it is so much more than that. There is a reason why it has been this influential. Also, for us on the North American side of the world, this is the only entry on the list available over on Funimation, though since Funimation and Crunchyroll are both owned by the same parent company, it's all part of the same family now. But because they are still siblings and not one entity, you can go and watch Mushoku Tensei over on Funimation, and then flip back to Crunchyroll for our final entry on the list today. The Faraway Paladin. Lastly, here we get a narrative that rides the line of technically isekai, but one that doesn't rely on that, at least not yet, to be interesting. In The Faraway Paladin, our protagonist gets reincarnated, but without most of their memories, and grows up in a unique location, surrounded by an animated skeleton, a mummy, and a ghost wizard who raise him to be a good person and set him on a path to becoming a paladin. There's magic, there are gods of good and evil, and there's a taste of... I guess the best way to describe it would be that it's a kind of morality that's not fully black and white, and that's quite fascinating. There is also the traditional aspect of being reborn, as all isekai need to have, but I almost feel like the story doesn't need that part of it. From what I have seen, The Faraway Paladin is probably one of the better straight-up fantasy anime that I have watched in a while, and if it wasn't an isekai, I think it could still be holding its own quite well. We have this kid who comes from a previous life they feel was wasted, raised by a group of characters who freely admit that they made their own bad choices for one reason or another, and in the end, the goal is to have our protagonist learn enough from all of this to become a virtuous paladin. And that roadmap for their character, as it was, is fascinating, because I am so used to like lawful good paladin stories where the character was virtuous from the beginning, which is possible, I mean, but it's just heavily unlikely. When a character has been virtuous and always been virtuous and has never been challenged at all, that's just asking for some kind of corruption arc to occur in the narrative, at least if the narrative hopes to be genuine. Here, though, that's not really necessary. Our protagonist has seen where being evil in this world will lead. They have seen the machinations of the god of the undead and decided of their own volition that that's not the path they want to walk down. Also, fun fact, this series is my favorite soundtrack for the season, bar none, mostly for the instrumentation and the general vibe of the whole thing. It's just been great. So even if I end up not enjoying the rest of the season for various reasons, I can be thankful that the soundtrack still exists. The curious and almost worrying part of The Faraway Paladin, though, is not necessarily where it's going with its plot, but rather what lies at the end of it. The original light novel hasn't seen a new volume since 2017, and eventually this adaptation will hit the end of what's been released. It's not clear if the plan is to keep going and finish on their own or leave off where the novel did. In either case, I'm worried about what that outcome will be, because what exists so far has shown us some of the best fantasy adapted to anime in a long time, and I'd like to be hopeful for how it goes, and I will happily watch it as it continues, but I can't help but be a little nervous as to what might happen by the end of it. And there you have it, 4 new isekai that you should already be watching. And if you are not, there will of course be links in the description to watch them, all on their respective streaming services. Accurate to the release of this video anyway. If you're watching this like 5 years from now, I don't guarantee that the links will be accurate anymore. I'm sorry. Very special thanks once again to Crunchyroll for sponsoring this video. It helps that you stream the majority of the isekai for this season, which made the sponsorship all the easier to make. And of course, a very special thank you to our patrons who support the work that I do here and allow me to keep doing what I do in the way that I want to do it. And for that, I am eternally thankful. Specifically, though, I would like to give thanks to patrons Ryfen Bonaparte, City Yamako, Wago221, Hector Montemayor, Omar Showman, and Sergeant Nemo 1 for being extremely and especially awesome. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty.